You know, one question I get quite often from my viewers is why I don't like torture tests for handguns, why I say they don't mean anything. Because I say that quite often. I especially say it when someone comes to me and goes, this gun, gun A, a proven gun that has a solid history of performance, just got beat by flavor of the week gun B here in a torture test. So that proves flavor of the week gun B is better than that time-proven gun. Well, that's ridiculous. Torture tests don't mean anything. The ones where they throw guns in the mud, or the ones where they run 10,000 rounds in 2 seconds through a gun, the manufacturer does to try to prove that it's durable, none of those mean anything. First off, those ones where they fire like thousands of rounds through a gun in a short period of time, those, like I say, they're just advertising. They're theater. You can do that with pretty much any gun if you have a competent gunsmith, maintain the gun before they do it, before you go out with it, you use the proper ammunition, you fire under the proper optimal conditions. You can do that with pretty much any gun. Just like you can make pretty much any gun fail that test by simply changing a few variables like maintenance or ammunition or weather, etc. So those don't really mean anything. Those are just advertisements. Now, the ones people like the most, the ones where someone will take 2 guns and go, we're going to throw these in the mud, and whichever one fails loses. Well, that doesn't mean anything either, because that is too small of a sample size. When you take 2 guns and throw them in the mud, there's too many variables there. Gun on the right might land in a place where there's actually a small little pebble that's just the right size to jam up the works, where gun on the left might not have that circumstance. So you didn't really learn anything, because this gun is facing different circumstances than this gun. Because of that variable, you have to have a much larger test frame. You have to have a larger sample, meaning you have to do it thousands of times to work out those variables. It's like if you flip a coin, and that coin comes up heads 8 times, well, from those 10 flips, you can't conclude that, well, the odds of a coin coming up heads is 80%, because that's not what it is. It's 50%. It's 50-50. The next coin toss is still a 50-50 chance. So if you flip that coin 100,000 times, then the law of probability should come into effect, and it should even out to where it's about half and half. So that shows you need a large sample, just like with these guns. Now, if you were injecting the exact same particles into each gun in the exact same places and then see how well they work, that would be more scientific, and you could have a smaller sample size. But when you're just randomly throwing them into the gun, you have to take account different circumstances for each gun, just how they hit the water, how they hit the mud, what's in this area, what's not in that area, what was moving when you dropped it, what wasn't. All those things have to be taken into account. So you have to have a sample size that is thousands of times wide, because this gun, gun A, that failed maybe 8 times out of 10, if you do it 10 times, if you go and do it 1,000 times, that gun might fail 1 or 2 more times. But the gun that only failed once during the first 10 times might fail hundreds of more times, because circumstances will then start to even out. That variable of circumstance will start to even out, and this gun might show that it's actually a weaker performance or a weaker performer. And that is what you have to do to actually have a test that means something. These tests where you just throw something in the mud mean nothing. What matters is not the histrionics of doing these tests, because that's what they are. They're histrionics. They're theater. They're a dramatization. And they're fun, but they're not really educational. What matters is not histrionics, it's history. What guns actually have a proven track record of real world performance? Those are the guns that actually have a history of reliability, not guns that got thrown in the mud randomly a few times. For example, a Glock Gen 3, proven gun. Smith & Wesson 686, proven gun. Beretta 92, Sig Sauer P226. All of those have real-world records of performance, whereas a gun that came out a year ago or 6 months ago does not. And throwing them both in the mud and making judgments off of tiny sample sizes means nothing. It doesn't counter reality. So like I said, histrionics doesn't mean anything. It's history that matters, and that's what you should take into account when you try to choose a reliable gun. Now, I'm not saying you can't choose new guns, because every old gun was a new gun at one point in time, so go ahead and choose new guns, because they can be reliable. But don't base your decision over who threw what in the mud and whether it worked, because that, like I said, is meaningless. When you make a decision about a gun, use the history of that gun. Take that into account. Then look at things like torture tests if you want to, and take whatever information you can get from them. But remember, it's not real scientific information. It's circumstantial. And I don't base my life on circumstantial evidence. I want to know if something has a history of performance. So that's why I don't like torture tests, because they really don't mean anything. They don't tell you anything, and they can change. Just because a gun does well being dropped in the mud 10 times doesn't mean that it's going to hold up. And in fact, a lot of reputable gun channels have done torture tests on guns saying, hey, this new gun won. But then they come back 6 months later and go, hey, this new gun that won the torture test crapped out on me after 3,000 rounds. That's because they're honest and they're telling you the truth. And that could happen because a gun, just because maybe it has loose tolerances, so it's less susceptible to debris, but that doesn't mean it's going to last longer, because those looser tolerances means more parts are banging together a lot more and things are going to fail more. So the gun in the long run isn't nearly as reliable as the gun that actually got a pebble in it and jammed. So you have to take things like that into account. History means everything. So when you're choosing your gun, like I said, choose whatever you want, but make an educated decision. Know that torture tests don't mean anything. Like I said, histrionics means nothing. When choosing a gun you're going to trust your life to, history means everything.